thank you for watching this teaching on the book of Colossians. Let me just go back to yesterday's video. I am not saying that it takes baptism to be saved. What I am saying is it takes baptism to get yourself free from the flesh. If you're struggling with flesh and you've never been water baptized, let me say something to you. You need to obey the scriptures and get water baptized. You need to be baptized by immersion, not by sprinkling, because it's a burial of your flesh. It's an act of faith that buries your sinful flesh in a grave. And then the great part about it is then when you come up out of that water, you are free. You're free. You're raised with Christ. Now, let's go on to verse number 13 because this all fits together. And the Apostle Paul writes in verse number 13, again, we're in Colossians 2, verse number 13. When you were dead in your transgressions and the uncircumcision of your flesh. Now, what is he talking about? How many of you know that all of us were at one time dead? Now, death does not mean to cease to exist. Many times we misunderstand the scriptures because we don't understand what the scriptures mean by dead. Dead means separated. You see, someday if Jesus tarries, someday this body is going to be separated from my spirit and my soul. My spirit and soul are going to go to heaven. My body's going to go in the ground. There's going to be a separation. Well, we were dead. We were completely separated from God. That was our condition before we accepted Jesus as the Lord of our life. We were dead in our transgressions. Now, this word transgressions is an interesting word because it means all those purposeful things that we did. It means all those times where we trespassed and gone away from what God had intended for our lives. All of those sins, all of those things that we did, that we sometimes knew it, sometimes we didn't know it, but we moved away from God. It caused this death. It caused this separation. You see, God didn't separate himself from us. We separated ourselves from him by not obeying what he's given us to do. Now, thank God for salvation. Thank God that chasm between the two of us, between God and ourselves, has been breached by the cross, by Jesus, and that we as believers now stand in the righteousness of God in Christ. But we need to understand where we were. We were separated. We were dead, separated because of our transgressions and because of the uncircumcision of our heart, because our hearts, or of our flesh, because our flesh was still in control of our lives. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever said, I'm not going to eat that brownie? I'm not going to eat that. No, I'm not going to eat that brownie. I'm not going to have that brownie with a scoop of ice cream on top. I'm not going to, and then you have the brownie with a scoop of ice cream on top. Well, you know why you do that? It's because your flesh is in control. Not the Spirit of God. And unless, how many of you know it's not a sin to eat a brownie with a scoop of ice cream on top? But your flesh needs to be cut off from you. And that happens first of all with Jesus, but then it needs to be buried in the waters of baptism. Now, the next thing that Paul says here in verse 13 is something beautiful. He made you alive together with him. What did Jesus do? Jesus took these two opposing forces and he made us alive. He put us in contact with the Father. He put us in contact with God, and He made us alive, not dead, not separated from God, not useless, not hopeless, but He made us alive. Do you understand how vitally important that we as believers get this into our spirits, into our minds, into our hearts? I have been made alive with Him. I am not dead. God has not turned His back on me. I am not alone. I am with Him. I am alive with Him right now, in any circumstance, in any situation. You have been made alive with Him, not alone, not in your own strength, not in the traditions of men, not in the philosophies, not in the empty deceits, but you've been made alive for one reason and one purpose, and one thing that's happened in your life is you've been joined with the Father. You've been joined with God because of Jesus. And anytime you're joined with God, you are alive. Do you understand how vitally important that we get this into our minds, we get this into our thinking, and then it becomes part of our living? And then the last part of verse number 13 says, having forgiven us all our transgressions. How does this all happen? Jesus shed His blood on Calvary. And that blood on Calvary forgave all in sign language. I don't know if you can see that on the camera or not, but He forgave all. In other words, we taking it all. He forgave all our transgressions, past, present, future. All of them have been forgiven. All of them have been wiped out. That's what forgiveness is. It's the wiping clean of the slate. It's not holding anything back. It's not holding anything from a relationship with each other. Jesus has forgiven you of all your transgressions. Think about that. Think about that as you go through your night or as you go through your day, whenever you're watching this video. Get that into your mind. You have been forgiven of all your transgressions. Join us again tomorrow as we continue to teach from the book of Colossians.